Hello bookworms, it's Jade from Bedtime Bookworm and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm bringing you my September reading wrap-up. I had a pretty decent reading month in September. I did read a little less than I would have liked, and it was very much skewed towards the end of the month, but I got 4 things read that I'm going to be telling you about today. I am really happy with the quality of the things that I read in September. This is how my ratings panned out. So I had 1 book that I gave 3 stars, 2 books that I gave 4 stars, and 1 book that I gave 5 stars. As far as how many of these were part of a series, 3 out of the 4 were part of a series, and only 1 of those 3 was a series starter, which is great because it means I'm making progress in some series. These are the 4 books that I'm going to be talking about in today's video. If you're only interested in hearing my thoughts on some of them, there will be timestamps in the description box so that you can jump to the ones that you're most interested in. Alright, let's jump right into it. The first book that I finished in September was Fablehaven by Mull. This is the first book in the Fablehaven series. I read this in a mix of hardcover and ebook form, both of which I got from my library. This book is a middle grade contemporary fantasy, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars. Middle grade isn't something that I read a lot of on my channel, but it's something that I have said for years that I want to read more of. I do enjoy middle grade when I read it, and I read a lot more of it in the past, like pre-booktube, but I haven't been reading a lot of it on this channel, so I was really happy to finally get around to picking this one up because it's been on my list for a long time. So this middle grade fantasy is about Kendra and Seth, 2 siblings. Kendra and Seth are taken to one of their grandparents' houses because their other grandparents recently died, and their parents and all of their siblings, so Kendra and Seth's aunts and uncles, are going on a cruise, which was like their other grandparents' dying wish or something. So Kendra and Seth are sent to their grandparents' house, and these grandparents they don't really know very well because for whatever reason they haven't spent a lot of time together. Kendra and Seth come to find out that these grandparents are basically caretakers of a preserve for like fairy tale animals or mythical creatures that's called Fablehaven. I really enjoyed this one. It was so much fun, and it was definitely exactly what I needed as I was coming out of a reading slump. It was light and funny and just a blast to read. I also did this as a buddy read with my friend Graf, and it was so much fun to talk about this book with him. I really enjoyed the main character, Kendra. Even though she's a middle grade age character, she's kind of on the older end of middle grade, I think. I think she just turned 13 or was turning 13. And I really liked her because she's like a smart character and she's kind of a rule follower, which is how I was when I was her age, and so I really connected with that. And then you have Seth, who is like the annoying younger brother character who's always like getting into trouble, and Kendra has to, you know, try to get him out of trouble sort of thing, and I just really enjoyed that dynamic. This book also made me laugh so many times. I felt like this was one of those middle grades that, I mean, anybody can enjoy any book of any age category, right? But you know how like the Shrek movies have jokes in them for adults, jokes that probably will kind of go over kids' heads, but adults would think is really funny. So I kind of felt like Fablehaven had some of those things in it. Not necessarily jokes that would go over kids' heads, but jokes that kids might not find as funny. For example, there was this whole scene where they were having steak for dinner, and Kendra is like really skeptical because the steak is not well done. It's like cooked medium or something. And so she asked her grandfather about that, and the adults at the table were like, why would you ruin a good steak by cooking it well done? Which I think is a common opinion that many adults have. And then Seth, the younger brother, is like, oh, I like this being medium. Can I have some ketchup to dip it in? And then the adults are all aghast because this kid wants to dip a perfectly good steak in ketchup. And I just found that scene really hilarious because of the like dynamic between adults and kids that I don't think kids would necessarily find quite as funny. So there were multiple scenes kind of like that were written in a way that adults would really get a good chuckle out of, and I really enjoyed those bits. I will definitely be continuing on with the rest of the series. There were a few like overarching plot things that were seeded in this book that I definitely want to see where they go in the rest of the series. The next book that I finished in September was Beautiful by Juliet Marillier, which I gave 3 out of 5 stars. I did this one on audiobook, which I owned. I got it off of Audible. It's actually an Audible original or an Audible exclusive. I don't remember exactly what the terminology is, but it's one of those where you can only get the audiobook from Audible, and it's also only available on audiobook. There's no print or ebook of it. One of the reasons I picked this one up back in, I think like last December, was because I have always wanted to try some Juliet Marillier, and I thought maybe this standalone story might be a good way to try her out. And also, I thought that I was a fan of the narrator Gemma Dawson. Not to say that she didn't do a good job, but I was kind of looking through my like spreadsheets and stuff, and I don't think I've actually read any or listened to any books that she's narrated before, so I don't know why I thought that, but she was a pretty good narrator. I didn't dislike her narration. So this story is actually a retelling of the fairy tale of the Nordic fairy tale, East of the Sun, West of the Moon, which was not a fairy tale I was at all familiar with. It's a fairy tale that has some overlap or similarities with Beauty and the Beast, which I found really interesting because apparently both of those fairy tales are kind of taken from or inspired by Cupid and Psyche. I do actually think this book is more enjoyable if you are already familiar with the fairy tale East of the Sun, West of the Moon. So the story is told in 3 parts, and the first part very closely mirrors that fairy tale but told from a different character's point of view, like a minor character in the fairy tale. And then in the second and third parts, it moves past that fairy tale and takes on a life of its own. And while I was listening to the first part of the story, it wasn't that I was confused, but I just felt like I was missing things or like not picking up on exactly what was going on. Like I just felt like I was missing things. So I ended up going on YouTube and watching a little video about East of the Sun, West of the Moon, just to kind of orient myself because I just was feeling a little bit lost. When I did that though, I didn't watch the end of the fairy tale. I just kind of watched enough to know what was going on in Beautiful because I didn't want to be spoiled for how part 1 was going to end. One thing that I did enjoy about the story was kind of like the fairy tale retelling aspect of it. It has like a fairy tale feel to it, like the atmosphere, you know, is fairy tale-ish, and I really like fairy tale retellings, and so I enjoyed that aspect of it, and I also think that fall is a great time for fairy tale retellings, so that's something that I really liked. But unfortunately, a lot of the rest of it didn't work for me. My favorite part of the book was the first part that closely mirrors the original fairy tale, and then from there, like I said, it takes a life of its own, and while I thought it was kind of interesting, I was kind of bored at the same time, and for like the last hour of the audiobook, I was just kind of ready for it to be over and just like over it. I wasn't into it. I think one thing that I struggled with was the main character. The main character, for good reason, is a really naive character, but I kind of found her annoying, and that's just not one of my favorite like character types to read from. I prefer more like smart characters over naive characters. In fact, there was a particular scene that kind of really frustrated me where basically someone gives her like a birds and the bees talk. I just thought it was really unnecessary and out of place and just not something that I wanted to read about. I do think if you're a fan of fairy tale retellings, and if you in particular are a fan of or familiar with the fairy tale of East of the Sun, West of the Moon, you might find this one a little more enjoyable than I did. I definitely will be reading more Juliet Marillier in the future. I'm definitely not taking this as a sign that I don't like her writing. Just this book in particular didn't work for me. It was just okay. The next book that I finished in the month of September was Artificial Condition by Martha Wells, which is the second novella in the Murderbot series, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars. This is an adult science fiction novella about Murderbot, who is one of my favorite AI characters that I have ever read. I do own the ebook of this. I was gifted it by my friend Graf recently, so thanks Graf. But I actually mostly listened to it on audiobook, which I got from my library. This was narrated by Kevin R. Free, and I actually really enjoyed his narration. I thought the voices he did for the AI characters, because there's actually a second AI character in this book, were great. And I definitely want to try more of the audiobooks that he has narrated because I thought he did a really good job. Being a novella, this one was definitely short and sweet, but it was so much fun. I laughed so many times while reading this book, and that's one of the reasons why I liked the first Murderbot book or novella, because it also made me laugh. Just the character of Murderbot is really funny. And I think that Martha Wells does a really good job of kind of humanizing Murderbot, but at the same time reminding us that Murderbot is not human. Also, as I mentioned, in this novella, Murderbot runs into another AI character named Art that I loved so much, and the voice that Kevin R. Free did for Art was hilarious, and I absolutely love the interaction between the two AI characters. This was definitely like a high 4, like a 4.5, but I don't know, I have a hard time giving shorter fiction 5 stars because it just doesn't hit as strongly for me when I don't spend as much time with the characters as I would in a full-length novel. I definitely will be continuing on with this series, and I'm actually like super excited for the full-length novel that came out earlier this year, because I heard just this morning, I was watching someone else's September wrap-up, and they talked about how in the full-length novel, which is the 5th book in the series, that Art makes a reappearance. And I got so excited when I heard that, and I cannot wait to run into Art again because I loved that character so much. And then the last book that I finished in the month of September, I technically finished it on October 1st, but it totally still counts, and that was Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson, which is the second book in the Stormlight archives, which, of course, I gave 5 out of 5 stars. Definitely my favorite thing that I read in September. I loved it so much. This is an adult high fantasy that, honestly, you've probably heard of before. I do own the audiobook and the ebook of this, and I started out also reading out of the hardcover, which I got from my library, but halfway through my reading of this book, that hardcover needed to go back to the library, so I ended up purchasing a paperback copy for myself, which was very exciting. I feel like words cannot describe how much I love this book and this series, and I know that the series is like super well loved on BookTube and, I mean, outside of BookTube as well. And I hate to kind of like add to that hype, but it is one of my favorite things that I've ever read. And honestly, if I had read Stormlight Archives before I read The Wheel of Time, I think that it would be my favorite series. I just have so much nostalgia associated with the Wheel of Time series that I can't let it take over, but it is actually better than the Wheel of Time series, while at the same time having a lot of similarities to the Wheel of Time series, and that's why I love it so much. Obviously, this being a second book in the series, I can't really go into details, but the first book had flashbacks for a character named Kaladin, and the second book has flashbacks for a character named Shallan. And I have to say that in the first book, I wasn't a huge Shallan fan. I just didn't jive with her sense of humor very well, but at this point I've gotten to know her a lot better and I actually really like her sense of humor. And I absolutely loved getting to know her backstory, which was revealed very slowly throughout the book. There are a lot of things that, have been hinted at before, and you only really see how those things played out in the past in this book. And now that it's all over, I really love Shallan. She's definitely moved up in my character list, although I don't know if that's particularly true. I like her more than I did before. I don't know if I necessarily like her more than Kaladin and Dalinar. Also, something that became more apparent to me in this book for some reason regarding Shallan is that she kind of has like a con artist thing going on, which looking back definitely started in the first book, but I just didn't like frame it that way in my mind. And I really enjoy like con artists in stories. I just love people who have to like think on their feet and be deceptive to get what they want. I love characters like that. And so that's definitely one of the reasons why I grew to enjoy her so much more in this book. And I don't know why I didn't realize that when we were introduced to her in the first book. I thought the pacing was really great in this one, a lot better than the pacing in Way of Kings. And I think that's just because we've already kind of gotten the ball rolling, we've set up the world building and set up these characters, but I just felt like there were interesting things happening in this book from beginning to end. There was not a dull moment in my opinion. And then of course the ending of this book, like the whole second half, there were just so many reveals and like little pieces to the puzzle that I was starting to piece together, and it was so much fun. I am actually making a few book diary videos for this, which are like spoiler filled, reaction-y kind of vlog style videos that I'm doing. So if you have read Words of Radiance, definitely be on the lookout for those videos because I think they're a lot of fun. I'm having a lot of fun putting them together. I was able to catch like the last hour of the last Storm Along 2020 live stream for this book. I didn't catch any of the earlier ones because I was constantly behind the read-along schedule, and even for this last one, it was a 2-hour live stream and I only caught the second hour because I hadn't finished the book and I was like literally reading while the live stream started. But I finished it and was able to catch the second hour of the live stream, and that was a lot of fun. I will have the playlist to the Storm Along 2020 read-along linked down below if you're interested in those live streams. Overall, I really enjoyed this one. I loved it so much, and I am so excited about continuing on in the series. I am actually currently reading Edge Dancer, which is the novella between Words of Radiance and Oathbringer, and I'm hoping to get to Oathbringer really soon. I'm super excited about it because Dalinar is one of my favorite characters, and Oathbringer is Dalinar's backstory, and honestly, I'm kind of nervous about what we might find out about his past. Alright guys, those are the 4 things that I read in September. If you have read any of these things, let me know down in the comment section what you thought of them, or let me know what some of your favorite things that you read in September were. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more bookish content. That is all I have for now. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bookworms, keep reading. Bye. Wrap up with only 2 books in it, so I included those. So I included the other blah 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 blah. I'm watching a little YouTube video about that goes over I'm definitely not taking this as a reason. The next book that I finished in the month of September was Artificial blah blah blah. Bye.